Hello everyone. I wish you a good day, a good afternoon, and a good evening. Welcome to the spUN Virtual High School Debate Tournament 2025 for 31st of May. Judge Shreya Srivatsan will be giving us feedback and announcing the winner at the end of the debate. Shreya Srivatsan is the University of Michigan student and has judged the spUN debates for the last 3 years. Shreya is driven by a passion for political science and public policy. My goal is to pioneer the next generation of space law by paving the way for legal accountability in the ever-expanding space industry. She resides in Michigan, USA. Judge, please be sure to record your information in tabron.com as soon as possible after this debate so that teams can be advised of their next debate status. I am the moderator and facilitator for this 2025 spUN tournament room, and my name is Wana Tanko, and Apurva is assisting. I would like to read the following statement to you. The winning team is chosen based on their skill and effort, not on any preset NSS positions. NSS clearly believes that humanity should continue to explore, develop, and settle space. However, NSS also believes that open and honest debate will facilitate that goal. It is important that space advocates understand and are able to express the anti-space case. No statement by any debater or coach is an official position of NSS. And now let's meet our debaters. The affirmative position is held by Team Scandium. Scandium is being considered for use in space due to its potential for high-temperature applications and its high-energy destiny. It's also being explored as a potential resource for use in space, like for building structures or powering spacecrafts. Its current value is about $1,800 per pound. The team is coached by Coach John Voss. John Voss has over 15 years of experience in speech and debate. John is a three-diamond coach in the National Speech and Debate Association and two-time recipient at the Ted W. Dell Debate Coach of the Year commendation. He has also instructed at debate institutes hosted by Terman College, the University of Michigan, California, Berkeley, and Marquette University. He has been with the spUN program for 7 years. Team Scandium, please give us your name and the country you are representing.
Hi, I'm from Advait from Team Scandium, and I'm representing the India.
Hello, my name is Maya and I'm representing Romania.
Hi, my name is Zain and I'm representing Syria.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Team Titanium. Titanium, a valuable metal found in some asteroids, is used in space due to its high strength-to-weight ratio, excellent corrosion resistance, and ability to withstand extreme temperatures. These properties make it ideal for use in spacecraft constructions, launch vehicles, and various space-related applications. The team is coached by Coach Temi Ruda. Temi Ruda is returning for her 4th year as a coach in the spUN debates. She has also been coaching Lincoln Douglas debate in Massachusetts, USA for 8 years, and was a Lincoln Douglas debater herself. A huge fan of Galileo, Copernicus, Kepler, and Brahe, Temi earned her bachelor's degree in the history of science, with a focus on the history of astronomy. Her degrees are from Harvard University. In her professional life, Temi is a fundraising consultant, providing guidance, training, and assistance to colleges, universities, and other nonprofits so that they can secure the financial resources they need to accomplish their important social missions. Team Titanium, please give us your name and the country you are representing.
Hello everyone, my name is Gauri and I'm representing India.
Hello, my name is Vivan and I'm representing India.
Hello, my name is Maria and I'm representing Romania.
Hello, my name is Charles and I'm representing the United States of America.
Now, if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand in your participants icon on your screen. Please mute your mic unless you are speaking, and only the presenting team and judge should turn on their videos, unless directed by the moderator. Our debating format today follows the same format as in the practice tournament. So let's get started. The 2025 spUN High School resolution is: An international body should establish a framework for the utilization of space minerals. We'll hear from the first speaker from Team Scandium, representing the affirmative position. Team Scandium, your first speaker may begin your affirmative intro. You have 4 minutes.
I just have a query. So like, should I give my introduction or like, should I like continue with my argument?
You can start your introduction if you want, or just your argument. It's upon you.
Thank you. An international body should establish a framework for the utilization of space minerals. Definitions. International body, a representative multilateral institution mandated specifically to govern space resource activities for the overall collective benefit of humankind. Framework, comprehensive binding regulatory system establishing, once again, sorry, I had to just establishing clear rules for property rights, benefit sharing, environmental standards for celestial bodies, safety protocols, dispute resolution mechanisms, and mandatory licensing oversight for extraction and space minerals activities. Utilization, the responsible extraction, processing, application, and distribution of space mineral resources for the benefit of all humanity, balancing commercial and economic interests with global public goods and scientific interest. Space minerals, naturally occurring non-renewable minerals on celestial bodies that have potential for innovation for scientific and commercial use. Core claim, a binding international framework can provide the necessary structure to unlock positive potential while mitigating harms. Case report, the current governance vacuum for space mineral utilization creates systemic risks and inefficiencies that stifle responsible development, scientific progress, equitable benefit sharing, and environmental protection. Environmental protection, preventing irreversible harm and ensuring planetary stewardship. Root cause, the tragedy of the cosmic commons. Celestial bodies are global commons. Without binding rules, individual actors prioritize short-term benefit and profit over long-term environmental preservation or protection, leading to contamination, disruption of pristine scientific environments like lunar pores, and generation of hazardous orbital debris from mining operations. Mechanisms of change. Binding environmental standards. The framework establishes minimum mandatory standards for extraction, processing, and waste disposal, limits on dust, protocols for protecting subsurface ice, strict containment of biocontaminants. Precautionary principle mandate requires comprehensive environmental impact assessments, the EIAs, before any activity is licensed and prioritizing avoidance of irreversible damage to scientifically valuable or unique environments. Independent monitoring and verification. The international body enforces monitoring via satellite sensors, mandatory reporting, independent inspections to ensure compliance. Non-compliance triggers sanctions, fines, license revocation, etc. Planetary parks and protected zones. Designates specifically critical areas, lunar polar regions, unique geological formations as off-limits to commercial exploitation, preserving them for research. Impact, preventing catastrophic environmental degradation, protects irreplaceable scientific records, ensures space remains accessible for future generations, and forces internalization of environmental costs by operators. Core problem, the space mineral-free for all guarantees environmental harm, investment paralysis, lost science, and extreme inequality. Only an international framework fixes this. Environmental catastrophe prevention. Root, tragedy of the cosmic commons. No owner is equal to no incentive to protect. Mechanism, binding environmental standards, pollution limits, contamination control, plus mandatory pre-approval impact assessments, plus planetary protected zones, lunar poles. Impact, prevents irreversible damage to pristine scientific and celestial environments, unlocking commercial investment and growth. Root, paralyzing uncertainty, no clear rules for property rights, liability, or
Thank
safety.
you. Thank you. Now, we begin a 3 minutes prep time for the negative team to prepare a cross-ex. If the negative team is ready to move on before the 3 minutes has elapsed, please indicate to me and we will proceed. Speaker -1 of Team Titanium, please begin your 2 minutes cross-ex on affirmative 1.
Okay, thank you. So my first question is, you talked about how not having an international body creates extreme inequality. Could you provide any evidence on that?
I would like the opponent to repeat the question again.
So you talked about how not having an international body would cause extreme inequality. So how exactly, do you have any evidence for that?
I don't have any evidence for that, but I'm sure that because of
Okay, I'd like to move on
international
to my next question. So how can an international body realistically enforce space mining regulations on countries who are locked in politically or military conflicts among themselves, who have no incentive to cooperate with each other?
International frameworks hold nations accountable for environmental problems. So
No, I don't think you
international
got my
frameworks.
question. My question is, how would an international body get countries who are locked in political or military conflicts to come together and come to a decision, to be part of an international body?
Yeah, so basically, there are many countries have a lot of allies, and they can convince them to join with the superpowers or spacefaring
So would
nations. And
that be a very long process? Yes or no? I want to answer yes.
maybe yes, because it takes a lot of
Okay,
time.
next question. I would like to move on to the next question. So you never really mentioned anything about universalization. So do you think it's important, or how do you define universalization?
So apparently, you need universalization because there are multiple actors like the private companies and many nations that are responsible for contamination of the space, and because of that,
Okay, next
there's a
question.
lot of
I'd like to my next question. So, are you aware that the US has pulled out of both the World Health Organization and the Paris Climate Agreement? So, and that after they pulled out, the international organizations could not function without their support. So, what about the powerful countries who would move out of an international body and they can't really do anything about it? So, have you proposing a system that could keep all the countries together?
Yes, apparently a lot of an international body can be formed, where all countries like represent like the United Nations. Basically, they can
Thank
form a
you.
new organization for the space.
Thank you. And now your opening argument, speaker -1 of Team Titanium for 4 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, respected judges and fellow debaters. I'm Gauri, the first negative speaker. Today, we, Team Titanium, negate the resolution. An international body should establish a framework for the utilization of space minerals. Before I begin, I would like to define a few key terms. International body. The LexisNexis defines the international body as an organization and its subordinate bodies governed by public international law or any other body which is set up by or on the basis of an agreement between two or more countries. Utilization, defined by the Cambridge Dictionary, is the act of using something in an effective way. Utilize, as defined by the Merriam-Webster, is to make use of or to turn practical use or account of something. Framework, as defined by the Cambridge Dictionary, is a system of laws, regulations, policies, and legal principles that govern a particular area of activity or organization. Universalization. We believe that universalization demands aggressive opportunity exploitation, and progress cannot wait. Private companies, however, can do this better as they are only prepared to act now, enabled by the free market. Today, I'm pleased to provide an overview of all the arguments that my teammates and I will be presenting in negation of the resolution. Today, we aim to prove to you that an international body should not establish a framework for the utilization of space minerals because 1, a framework would restrict or slow down innovation. 2, international bodies are not fair. And 3, private companies increase accessibility and universalization. In this speech, I'll show you how international frameworks in space mining hinder innovation and co-opetition for developing nations, and that competitive decentralized systems are better for achieving universalization than centralized control of international bodies. Firstly, a rigid international body limits and stifles co-opetition. A system, it's dynamic in today's economy. Co-opetition is a simultaneous cooperation and competition between two entities, which have led to groundbreaking advancements. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Pfizer and BioNTech, two companies, they cooperated with each other to create one of the first successful COVID-19 vaccines. As Affilio 2021 notes, new biotech firms are more innovative than when they ally with larger pharmaceutical companies for commercializations. Large firms may struggle with inefficiencies in integrating new technologies. An article by the Martin Russell for the European Parliament May 2020 outlined how WHO, the World Health Organization, a global institution, outperformed during the earlier days of COVID-19. They accepted China's claims that the virus would not spread between humans and ignored Taiwan's early warnings due to political pressure. This is just the best example that the WHO taken sides with China, which means that this can happen even in an international body where centralized control would be important. Next, healthy competition has spurred rapid innovation. Dr. Richard Horton has highlighted that the combination of competition and partnership were critical for the swift vaccine rollout. That private companies and the intercompany coordination was exactly the reason that these vaccines were able to save many lives. Secondly, an international body facilitates monopolies because when you have an international body, the decisions are made globally. Access to resources would only be there for the powerful nations. And the real question is this the universalization we want for the future? In universalization can only be asserted when every actor has equal chance to participate, not just the wealthiest. The poorer countries who cannot afford the high cost of membership will be left behind. Florian Rabbit in his article says that despite the normative appeal of a multilateral system, equitable regime for resources, its political and structural conditions under its formation is highly implausible. The most important thing is that free market does not prevents monopoly. This system of check and balance, where, for example, if SpaceX is ahead for a long time, companies like Astroforge and Transastar are catching up. It's not a closed club. Companies are on the basis of rise and fall on profit and merit. So the most important thing is this: in a free market, monopoly can never really occur. That, in fact, is real universalization, where everyone has an equal opportunity. As Donovan Zagarin quoted in his Market Responsible for Monopolization 2021, monopolies in America are largely created due to government intervention, not pure market forces. As astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson once said, we are part of this universe, we are in this universe, and more perhaps important than that is the fact the universe is in us. Universalization should affect the truth. Everyone has a place, not through global control, but through inclusive and fair participation. Now, for these reasons, we urge you to vote for the negative. Thank you.
Now, affirmative 1 from Scandium. Please start your cross-ex on -1. You are allotted 2 minutes. Your microphone is not open.
Sorry for the problem. What will happen if some countries do not want international universalization?
Well, I do not suppose I'm not talking about internet. Like, if universalization is basically where everyone has an opportunity, and the free market would just increase that because everyone starts at the same level, and when everyone's given the same opportunities, then that's basically universalization. Everyone has an equal opportunity. So I don't think that like private companies and having a free market is the best system for ensuring that universalization actually works. Because in international bodies, they're often monopolized by the countries which have the rich, like higher amount of resources. Example, the UN, because there was a system of veto power. Countries who had larger power, they dominated it, and this like countries who were like economically backwards, they were not able to voice out their opinion, so they were silenced there. And that's what's going to happen if you have an international body for space mining.
So how will an international framework prevent innovation?
Well, I'm not supporting for an international framework, but an international framework would totally not. Can you repeat the question? I didn't get it.
Okay, so how will an international framework prevent innovation?
How would it prevent innovation? Okay, so when you have an international system, when a decision has to be made, or a new development has to be made, there's so much system, it needs to go through so many people. This system of bureaucracy slows everything down, and therefore innovation cannot be done faster. And because of this, companies and countries in general would not want to go through all this process. Instead, they would independently want to work in a free market where they can make their own decisions and go forward and prioritize profit and universalization again, because people get equal opportunities, and you don't have to always be in the strands of bureaucracy, and you don't have to be in the system of an international body which has takes so much time to make a decision. So the innovation dies down over time. So you can be more innovative in a system of a free market where everyone can do what they want in specific rules and frameworks in depth in their companies.
But what if it involves a lot of risks, basically? Then what would happen?
Risks in which, like, I don't get the question.
So like imagine that there are like a lot of rockets sent to space, but it contaminates the space. So what will happen? What will happen to the the space? Will it be accessible for other future companies which are planning to launch rockets?
Thank you. Thank you. Now, the affirmative 2 of Team Scandium offers the second argument for the affirmative team. You have 4 minutes.
Okay. Honorable judge, moderator, and fellow debaters. My name is Maya. Good day. And today I'm going to be the second speaker of the affirmative team. And I'm going to further support the motion with the argument that a strong international framework would ensure a universalized way of the correct use of resources while avoiding conflicts. These resources are rare on Earth. However, there's a huge amount of them in space. And once nations and private companies get the green light that they can get there, there's a huge opportunity for innovation and territorial use. So without an international framework, there will be lots of conflicts. Why? Because they won't get the same equal opportunities. How can nations agree to share these assets if they have unfair advantages? International frameworks are designed with equity. So there's already a gap between developing countries and third world countries because of the lack of resources. However, international frameworks diminish these imbalances by encouraging alliances and cooperation, which the negative team stated that universalization is. How would the lack of an international system or framework provide equal opportunities if they don't even play the same game with the same rules? Partnerships between all nations are crucial to utilizing space minerals in a universalized way in order to not exponentially grow the imbalances between first world and third world countries. For example, we have the Alliance of Small Island States, which right now has limited global warming. So this proves that international frameworks work for cooperation. But let's talk about what the lack of an international framework would do. That is contradictions that would further lead to conflict. For example, we have the US federal law that enables the commercial exploitation of space resources, while Japan's Space Resources Act provides for the ownership of mined space resources by licensed companies. While these national frameworks provide a somewhat clear set of rules, they clearly highlight the need for an international framework. If both countries got there and they had different rules, they say they are right or the other one is right, there will be contradictions and conflicts, in which countries and globally, we will forget the goal of what space mining is, innovation. Furthermore, the Article 3 of the Outer Space Treaty links international environmental law with space resources, with space exploration, stating that activities in space must be conducted in accordance to international law, including environmental protection. An international law ensures cooperation. Space mining works better and faster, but it also ensures stability. So private companies and investors will want to invest and provide funds for space mining because they know it's a long-term stable investment. But what about mistakes that nations might do? An international framework holds these nations accountable. So the countries are not only socially responsible for their own citizens, but they have to be responsible for the whole, the global society. An international framework sends out the message that the country can't risk global innovation and safety for the benefit of their own citizens. So they countries often rely on partnerships, which an international framework clearly supports. So let's talk about the gap between first world countries and third world countries, especially in the legal system. What if one country has a stronger legal system and another one has a weaker legal system? Won't that disadvantage and create unfair advantages between countries? Countries will start to forget the actual goal of space minerals, space mining, and they will forget all about equal opportunities. The negative said that universalization is are the same opportunities. How can they get same opportunities if they don't even have the work under the same set of rules and they're allowed to do whatever they want? Thank you.
Let's now hear -2, Team Titanium, in a 2 minutes cross-examination.
Okay. You mentioned that an international framework ensures safety and decontamination of space. Then do you have any evidence of it? Because I have a strong counter evidence in which the 2007 Chinese anti-satellite missile test created over 3,000 pieces of space debris in spite of the OST being in place.
Well, there are international laws and even national laws, or even the lack of a framework can provide. So people will still want to do bad things and avoid the law, whether that's international laws or legal laws, or national laws. But international laws are more strict, and the countries or criminals are held more accountable for these things, whether an national framework or so. International frameworks are more strict, and they hold the accountable
Yeah.
criminals.
Okay. Even if there is a framework or not, criminals would be treated the same. And my evidence, I think, proves that there were no enforcement in spite of there being an international framework. And my second question is, you mentioned that international frameworks reduce conflict within bodies, but then why has the UN Security Council has been unable to stop wars like the Gaza war? And why has US unilaterally stepped into the Russian-Ukrainian war? And has there been no international control over it?
You're asking the wrong questions. How would it look like if the UN didn't exist? It would be totally be worse. It wouldn't get better if there wouldn't be a UN and an international
Okay.
framework,
But
because
my
there
point is,
wouldn't
in
be
spite of the UN existing, there is no enforcement by the UN, and it's better at that point if it doesn't exist because only the countries in it, they're being treated equally by permission, not because of their progress or their actions, right?
Can you repeat that, please? I didn't.
In spite of the UN being there, it's not being able to enforce the wars efficiently, right? That's a clear example of, say, international unions or frameworks being bad at enforcement, right? So does it really make a difference?
So international frameworks are like the UN is an international
Thank you.
company.
Thank you. Let's hear from -2 from Team Titanium for your second argument. You are allotted 4 minutes.
A very good morning, afternoon, and evening to the esteemed judges, moderators, and my fellow debaters. I am Vivant from Team Titanium, and it's an informed negation of the resolution being discussed today. Our first, second argument for today is that regulation kills progress, it doesn't kill problems. And the national framework of space mineral utilization and mining would only choke competition, discourage investment, and slow down innovation. NASA recognized that frameworks kill progress. They would be slower, more expensive, and less effective. In 2016, for the new EVA spacesuit project, they were already 20 months behind schedule and over $200 million over budget. Realizing the inefficiencies of a framework run program, they offered $3 billion as a contract for any private corporation to create a spacesuit for them. Private companies design spacesuits better, faster, and cheaper. Innovation, even in the area of safety, is driven by private companies, not framework led organizations. Seatbelts, one of the most life saving car technologies, was introduced voluntarily by a private company, Volvo, in 1959. Not because the framework demanded it, but because the company valued safety and reputation first, which allowed them to make more profits. One fact paramount to our case is that private companies innovate because the public market demands it. In a free market, profit comes from progress. If companies don't innovate, if they don't improve, they fail. Hence, they're pushing to innovate, not by regulations, but to survive in the market. International bodies just don't work the same way. They have no profit motive, so they don't really push for real breakthroughs. They slows down progress and innovation. As a result, spacefaring costs remain expensive, locking the space to the very wealthy few. Hence, demeaning universalization by increasing the price threshold to access space. On the other hand, private companies rely on public trust and results, so they cannot afford to act in an unfair or monopolistic fashion. Our third argument for today is that an international body only claims to promote fairness, but they let the most powerful nations control the rules. The IMF, or the International Monetary Fund, is a clear proof of this rigged system. The IMF's voting power is directly tied to its financial contributors. The US alone holds 16.5% of the vote, while the entire African continent has just 6.5, in spite of having a population 22 times greater than the US. It's far worse for the UN Security Council. Only 5 out of 15 nations hold veto power, which allows them to block any decision that threatens their interests, no matter how many other nations support it. On November 20th, 2024, the US used the veto power to disband the need for an immediate ceasefire in the ongoing war of Gaza. US was the only nation against the immediate ceasefire. Their sole control because of the veto power has caused death and homelessness of over 48,000 people. This is a clear proof of the inefficiencies of an international framework. A space mining framework created by an international body would operate the same way, ensuring that the space minerals are controlled by a very few nations which are powerful and wealthy, and are never truly accessible to all of the people. Finally, our fourth argument for today is private companies increase universalization by reducing costs and boosting speed and thus improving accessibility. Today, SpaceX, a private company, has reduced launch costs per kg from 54,000 USD with NASA's space shuttle to a mere 2,700 USD with their Falcon 9. Virgin Galactic, another company, has pioneered space tourism for 2 decades before any government or framework-led organization, giving private citizens access to space. Now let's consider another example of inefficiencies hindering universalization. The ITU, International Telecommunications Union, took decades to implement the global internet infrastructure, while SpaceX's Starlink and Eutelsat's OneWeb rapidly expanded satellite networks, bringing connectivity to the remotest regions on Earth within 4 years, hence boosting universalization. SpaceX and Rocket Lab already launched satellites from developing nations like Bangladesh and Turkmenistan. This is clear evidence of private companies boosting universalization by offering infrastructure to developing nations, something that international frameworks have not done yet. Through this speech, we have shown that private companies foster universalization better than an international framework. They lower costs and make it accessible to developing nations. It's now clear that private enterprises, not international bodies, boost universalization. With this, I would like to end my speech. Thank you.
Now, Team Scandium, please start your 2 minutes of a cross-X to -2 of Team Titanium.
Okay, so how would an unstable national frameworks or no international frameworks attract investors if they're not stable?
Could you repeat your question?
How would the lack of an international framework attract investors?
Okay, without an international framework, there would be a free market, and every company would have their own innovations, own progress, and own technologies. And this variety of technologies would gather the investors behind them. There would be no international framework to regulate who can invest in what company. They would not be able to do what they wish.
Could you give me an example of an international framework that blocks transactions or investors? I don't think they exist, but if you have an example of that.
Which, for example, the UN Security Council, in spite of having many investors, like all the nations, it still grants control to a select few 5 nations, like I mentioned in my speech, which can take any action they want by using the veto power.
So you said private companies can invest, they benefit from the investment of the private companies, but how can private companies not want to invest if they don't know it's stable? Because private companies rely on transactions between different nations, so they need global stability. How would the lack of an international framework allow that?
I'm sorry, I couldn't really understand your question because private companies won't be the ones doing the investment. They'll be creating the technologies for people to invest in.
You gave an example of how private companies fund these innovation and how it will slow down, and an international framework will slow down innovation because private companies won't invest. But private companies want to invest if there isn't an international framework. So could you give me an example of what you said in your speech that international
Yep.
frameworks would? Okay.
I said that international frameworks would slow it down and that private companies would create better tech quicker and faster,
Thank
which
you.
would lead investors into private
Thank
companies and
you.
not international frameworks. I use the
Thank
NASA
you.
example for this.
Thank you. Now we begin a 2 minutes prep time for both teams to prepare their rebuttals. Negative free from Team Titanium, please give your rebuttal in your 4 minutes of time.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I am Maria, and I'll be the third negative speaker today. I will offer the rebuttals of the negative side. During this debate, my teammates explained why an international body should not be in charge of the utilization of space minerals. By definition, utilization implies the most effective use. Thus, choking innovation contradicts the resolution as it is not most efficient. Let's begin with the negative team contention. We first showcased that the framework would restrict and slow down innovation as it harms competition and forces the uniformization of all companies. This also creates monopolies while also raising costs, thus slowing universalization because innovation becomes inaccessible. Secondly, we showcased how international bodies are not fair and therefore should not be left in charge. Evidence showed how they are power-driven at the expense of innocent lives. Finally, we expressed how private companies improve accessibility by reducing costs and timeframes in comparison to the government and by making their services available worldwide. Affirmative state Affirmative gave no definitions for universalization and barely mentioned this concept. Their definition didn't have any source, thus being unofficial. The affirmative argued that an international body ensures safety. However, we should not mistake regulations for safety. Seatbelts, one of the most life-saving technologies in the world, were introduced voluntarily by Volvo, not because the government demanded it, but because the company valued safety. They also believed that this would focus and strengthen their reputation and help them make a greater profit. The global safety standard they advocated for but gave no evidence is already happening because of Tesla's free-to-all patterns. Affirmative stated that the framework in an international body would perfect the environment. However, they didn't give any evidence about debris removal, which the majority to this date is generated under government programs. The 2007 Chinese anti-satellite test alone created over 3,000 pieces of debris. The Outer Space Treaty was in place, but no one acted. Kyoto Protocol is another clear example. It imposes sustainability standards only for developing countries, allowing polluted industries in underdeveloped ones. A 2020 study from the University of Bucharest shows how economic cost of these countries affiliated rose up to 2,273 for each country. Companies care for the environment, and they are eager to report their environmental performances as it drives investments and builds reputation. For example, McKinsey study found that companies who make their sustainability reports accessible make a greater profit. No international body has reached 100% sustainability revenues, but Energy, a Canadian-based company, has done that. Affirmative argued that an international body is fair and accessible. However, international help comes with strings attached, and this is what the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund prove by dismantling austerity measures alongside the loans they give to vulnerable countries. Thus, according to the International Journal of Epidemiology, once loans were given to Cameroon and Greece, both countries suffered severe malnutrition and the poverty rate rose 20%. Affirmative provided UN example as equity provider, thus promoting unequitable mechanisms such as veto votes. Membership does not ensure access only to the riches. A 2023 study by the University of Singapore shows how the International Telecommunication Union fails to support countries without satellite capacity. The private sector was one who enabled them because SpaceX launched Botswana first satellite in 2025, who was giving information for the development priorities of the country. Speaker 2 added conflict preventions. However, the non-weaponization of space was voted in the UN General Assembly, but failed because Russia vetoed against the resolution, therefore dissolving it, showing once again that it is countries who want war, not companies. The negative to give evidence about international framework, the UN, but this has failed the people in Gaza. In cross-ex, Affirmative 1 agreed that he has no evidence to the argument proposed and he didn't address the conflict questions. Affirmative 2 argued that innovation through collaboration is faster, and we do agree. But what is even faster is competition. And we show that after the regulations were lifted, with COVID-19, okay.
Thank you. Affirmative 3 of Scandium, now give your 4 minutes rebuttal.
Honorable judges, the opposition claim our framework is flawed, but their alternative, a lawless free-for-all where the powerful blunder space, developing nations are locked out, and humanity's shared heritage is auctioned for billionaires. They offer no solutions, only myths. Let's fabricate them. First, international bodies fail. Their claim, no enforcement, because their evidence was the UN proof, no universalization, UN withdrawals. What we say, no enforcement, a false parallel. The UN's enforcement gaps stem from political conflicts, not structural flaws. Our specialized space resource authority, like the ITU or ICAO, that you didn't even recognize, operates on technical consensus, not geopolitics. Precedents, ITU spectrum rules are followed by 193 states, including the US that you said that withdraw from the WHO, because they provide the mutual benefit, not coercion. Second, non-universalization, that's strategic self-sabotage. They admit that the US quit some bodies, but not the ITU, WTO, or Armistice Accords. Why? When rules serve national interests, states comply. Our framework ensures compliance by two things. First, mandating resource access for signatories as the incentive. Second, blacklisting free riders from orbital slots, mining zones as the cost. Their non-universalization is self-fulfilling prophecy. They perpetuate exactly. Third, US withdrawals prove failure. No, that's literal cherry picking. The US left the UNHRC and Paris Accords over ideology, not functional bodies like the World Trade Organization that handles $20 trillion in trade. Our model mirrors the WTO, binding arbitration, mutual gains. If they trust markets, why reject the body that enables space markets? Second, free markets equals equality. I'm sorry, free market helps. They do not help the poor. Bodies do not favor. Our bodies do not favor the rich. We say that free markets do not help the developing nations that literally colonialism. Without our framework, mining rights go to those with existing capital or tech. Elon Musk in Ghana proof it's deep sea mining, 90% controlled by the five rich nation corporations. Their free market is feudalism with rockets. Second, bodies favor the wealthy. So does anarchy. They claim our bodies are rigged, then endorse a system where Amazon builds private space armies. Our framework fixes power imbalances. One state, one vote in the General Assembly, like the ISA. Royalties fund capacity building for developing states. Tech transfer mandates break monopolies. Their alternative power determines ownership. Exactly the imbalance they pretend to fear and contradicts with themselves. Third is the framework stifle innovation. That's what they claim. They say that rules slow progress. Free market drives efficiency. What we say that rules do not kill innovation. That's proven false. Renewable energy boomed under Paris Accord targets. Aviation safety soared under ICAO rules. Why? Certainty attracts investment. Their free market in space means no liability clarity, no insurance equals no funding, no environmental standards, BR disasters, public backlash. That's what kills innovation, not rules. Second, free market drives efficiency, and that's in fancy lands. Markets need property rights to function. Without our framework, a U.S. firm's asteroid basically claim is ignored by China. Resource wars aren't efficient, they are extinction level. Our body provides global recognized titles, distribute courts, and safety standards preventing Kessler syndrome, which would trap humanity on Earth. Their deregulated utopia is the debris field and bankruptcy courts. Opponents battle fatal contradictions. Bodies are weak, but bodies are too powerful. Markets help the poor while admitting the poor get excluded. Thank you so much. That's my speech.
Thank you. Now we begin a 2 minutes prep time for both teams to prepare their summaries. Now, let's hear from -4 for the 4-minute summary.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, fellow debaters and honorable judges. I would like to stand in firm negation of the resolution that was previously discussed in these debates, for many reasons that I will discuss now. Firstly, the spun debates at their core are about universalization, what would be best for everyone involved. Our team, the negative, talked so much about how our resolutions would bring across universalization in many ways, such as opening a free market and allowing for equal access for all. The affirmative team did not mention universalization nearly as much as we did, not giving any credence to their ideas that an international body would be able to bring the same amount of universalization that private companies would. This is especially supported by the fact that bureaucracy, in its essence, only slows things down. The bureaucratic red tape and bloodlust that are combined with international bodies' drive to increase their own power, especially the power of the powerful countries that already hold controlling shares in these companies, is far too much of a danger to even consider putting them in as a viable alternative to increase universalization. Because the powerful countries in control of these international bodies, they drive bloodlust and paralysis, not progress and innovation. For example, the US, using its veto power to cancel the ceasefire in Gaza, caused the death of thousands of innocent lives. Any attempt to defend this wholly preventable loss of life goes against all rhyme or reason, and especially goes against any sort of universalization that could possibly be defined. As the affirmative rebuttal speaker passionately said, private companies are in the hands of billionaires. However, international bodies are in the hands of something far worse, namely corrupt politicians. This debate is about what would be best, what should be best, and what should occur. And having entrepreneurial individuals drive progress is far better than having politics drive paralysis. In summary, international bodies are like puppets, where powerful countries are the puppet makers, making them dance to whatever tune that best pleases them. On the other side of the same universal coin, co-opetition spurs innovation, which increases universalization and access. And you can only have access to co-opetition if you have access to not international bodies, absolutely not international bodies, to private companies. For example, the reduced costs by SpaceX, reducing their costs from millions of dollars in rocket fuel down to just thousands, creates far more accessibility for developing countries that a corrupt international body cannot propose to have. The private company's tech is far more accessible because of the innovation and lower cost that they provide, which is why they provide universalization in far greater amounts than an international body ever could. These arguments are very powerful, but some of them are better than others, way more than others. And the argument that bias and slowing hurts universalization by reducing the innovation that helps developing countries get into the space economy weighs far more than any possible benefits that were possibly mentioned by international bodies because of just how fast the space economy is growing. The global space economy is set to triple according to the World Economic Forum within 10 years, and no evidence was provided by the other teams to support the claim that international bodies could even manage to keep up in part with how rapid this growth is. Meanwhile, the private companies are driving this rapid growth. They're causing the tripling. They increase universalization, and they are our best path forward. This is why the resolution that international bodies would best be suited to establish a framework for space mining should be firmly negated. Thank you.
And finally, we'll hear from Affirmative 4 from Team Scandium, who will begin their summary in the 4 minutes allotted.
Sure. Hello. Today's debate has brought a very important discussion on the motion an international body should establish framework for the utilization of space minerals. The affirmative team argued that several countries such as the United States, Luxembourg, United Arab Emirates, and Japan have their own national laws for space exploration and utilization of space minerals, which have commercialized space exploration. According to the Article 2 of Outer Space Treaty, it establishes that no country can claim ownership of outer space or celestial bodies. According to the Article 3 of Outer Space Treaty, it emphasizes that all activities in space must abide with international law, including the United Nations Charter, to avoid militarization of space. We need an international body to manage the extraction and use of space materials and ensure sustainable practices that stick to global environmental standards and the Outer Space Treaty. Space mining requires latest technology such as AI, robotics, and space transport. Not only governments, but many private companies are also engaged in space exploration, with multiple actors involved. If there is no international regulation, conflicts can happen between nations, inequalities and benefit sharing and environmental contamination. There are many developing countries that depend on mineral exports but do not have the resources to get to space. If spacefaring nations continue to mine the minerals, it will take away the opportunities of developing countries to grow and develop. The weak countries would become weaker. Only an international body can balance the interests of spacefaring nations, and the emerging ones can create peace. Celestial bodies are global commons. Without binding rules, individual actors prioritize short term benefit and profit over long term environmental preservation or protection, leading to contamination and generation of hazardous orbital debris from mining operations. Why must universalization be international? Scale, environmental damage, market distortion, and inequity are global problems needing global solutions. Legitimacy and enforcement. Only a multilateral body can set binding standards, levy royalties, enforce liability, and manage a global fund creatability against powerful actors. Efficiency prevents a chaotic patchwork of conflicting national rules that stifle operators and sites. Upholding OST implements benefit of all mankind concretely. The affirmative team would like to conclude by stating that for the above reasons, an international body definitely helps to prevent conflicts between countries and private players, ensure equitable access, especially for developing countries who lack space capabilities, promote sustainability, avoid overexploitation, and protect the fragile space environment, encourage responsible investment in space exploration, preventing catastrophic environmental degradation, protects irreplaceable scientific records, ensures space remains accessible for future generations, and forces internalization of environmental costs by operators. What we prioritize will decide our future: an equitable international framework or freedom of countries and companies. Unregulated mining means environmental ruin, commercial stagnation, lost science, and a dangerous space wealth gap. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations, everyone. Thank you. Judge Shreya, would you like a couple of minutes before you offer your feedback and the winning team?
Sure, yeah. I'm almost done with my comments. Apurva, I'm still not able to like look at or see the thing on tab room. Because when I click on like your upcoming judging, it just doesn't show up. So I'm not sure where you want me to submit the ballot still. Um, but that's the only thing. Like I have like the document filled out with the comments and then the rankings and everything.
We can figure that out after the debaters leave the room.
Okay, cool. That sounds good. Then yeah, I'll just take a minute or two and then I'll wrap up my thoughts and be back.
Thank you. Judge, are you ready for the feedback?
Yeah, just 1 more minute, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. This was a really good round, and would you want the decision first and then like the reasoning, or the reasoning and then the decision? What would you prefer?
The decision first, please.
Okay.
The reasoning.
I'll go with decision because that's what I heard first. But I ended up voting neg in this round. So congratulations for winning. In terms of the actual feedback, I can go speaker by speaker just because it flows well. But Advait, you had some bumps in delivery of speech, which should reduce if you practice your speeches and know your points very well, at the beginning especially. This is just about your first speech. I'm going to talk about that later. And so there's like a little bit of a poor connection to universalization initially, but it was well emphasized at the end of the debate in your last speech, which is too late to introduce like these themes, right? And so Neg did a really good job at attacking this. Like Gari had like a really good cross, and there was a perfect balance of aggression and also like respect. And I love the strategy, Gari, that you implemented to just like keep taking up the time when you were being asked the questions. Like I can tell that you were doing that, and I think that's really strategic. So kudos to you for implementing that to maximize the points that you're trying to make. I did notice that like I think once or twice at some points it was kind of to the point where it was not really helping your case, like make the points and then um try to like cross the bridge and be like, oh, like this is something like the next speaker can talk about, or we're going to be talking about this and this. And if that's something that is not already being discussed like in the future speeches. So that's something I would suggest honestly for both sides. It's just like if you don't know the answer to something, or if you are at a point where you're like, oh well, I kind of understand, but I'm not sure which direction to take this response, is to just be like, yeah, like a future speaker is going to be talking about this, and we're going to be discussing point A, B, and C that you just brought up during cross into the speech. So that's something that would be helpful for me. Maya, is that how you say MAIA? I'm guessing it's Maya. So something that I caught in your speech was there are already gaps between third world and first world countries, right? So you mentioned that, but then there was no like link to that argument itself. It was kind of just there. And so I was wondering, like I think it might help to restructure your speech a little bit so that it flows better to make your main points. Because when I was like taking notes, it kind of felt like it was going in different directions that was not like connecting very well. So I think if you were to practice your speech, maybe just if it's helpful, you can just be like, Judge, today I'll be talking about like just give me like an outline at the beginning of the speech, maybe like point A, B, and C, and then talk about point A, B, and C, and try to like um use this opportunity to like pass the baton to the next speaker, because that's your job at the middle of the debate. It's like to just support your other speakers and make sure that the next speaker is prepared to take on what you have prepared for them, right? Because if there's no like if the middle speakers like let's say speaker 2 and 3 on both sides, like um if you are not successfully creating the opportunity for the next speaker to bring up those points and making that space, then it's not going to be like a well constructed speech, and it's not going to help the debate. It's not going to help you win the tournament. So that's something that I would definitely suggest doing. Um, Vivan, pretty decent job. I think Cross can definitely improve. Your job as the second speaker again is to further what the first speaker had brought up, and then to also like pass the baton next to the next speaker, right? To make sure that they have the space to do that. I think you did that pretty decently. So good job on that. I would say that like you had some really good technical knowledge and a technical perspective, and it's clear that you did your research, so good job on that. I would definitely say that, yeah, cross can improve a little bit, honestly, for everyone. And you could also have I guess improve the connection to universalization, but I think the first speaker did a decent enough job at that, where there was no like risk that you were like losing out on it, considering that your speech time is very small. You don't have much time to even dive into the concepts very deeply. Um, let's see, and then Zion, I think you're a very passionate speaker, and that's really good, but I would also make sure that your speech is like well constructed and organized. I think a lack of organization and flow of the speech actually hindered your ability to persuade, and it made your speech a little weaker than it should be or it could be. Maria, you had a really well organized speech. I would suggest maybe just like again listing out the key focus areas, so the arguments are not washed down, that way, because like your job is to, I mean, it would just be helpful for the judges to have like a clear idea of what to expect. Maybe this could come at the end or at the beginning, doesn't really matter, but because you're the last speaker, I would, or not last speaker, but like because you're one of the last speakers, it would be really important to again like re-emphasize those points. That way it's like in my head of like, oh, this opposing point was not brought up by the opposing team, or like these are things that they haven't addressed, and you can set that up for the end of the speeches, like towards the end of the debate. So that's something that I would suggest. Charles, great conclusion. I love the strong connection back to universalization. I would for like both the last speakers, Advait and Charles, I would say that it's important to conclude and just say like you should vote, like judge, you should vote on these three things. And keeping that organized helps me keep my notes organized so I know what to look for. And that way you're just telling me what to vote, and like what to factor in my decision. But yeah, in terms of like connection to universalization, just like the topic and really the technical perspective is brought to the table and organization, as well as the argument development. Like those are like some of the strongest aspects I found in the neg, and that's why I voted for the neg team this round. Any questions? Happy to answer via email as well. If that's something that you guys want to do, I can put it in the chat, but I am not able to use Tabroom to submit my decision still. So if someone can help me with that, that would be great. I can also email the comment sheet that I have, like the document that I have out.
Yes, let me check on Tabroom.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sorry, Zane, did you have a question?
Yes, please. A request for a clarification. So, is the judging as an approval made based on the connection to universalization without looking on the logos or the logic behind, or is it made on the clash points like the WSDC system of judging?
Wait, so what is your question? Sorry.
As the system of judging, is it based on how much the arguments are connected to the concept of universalization and how effective it is to stakeholders, or moreover as in competitive approach, or moreover on the clash points?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. I think from what I was weighing it as was just like how both teams approach the topic itself. Like topicality is a huge point of something that's really popular in LD because I did that in high school a little bit. But topicality is something that you really want to focus on. So whichever team is really able to properly like address the topic, which should be something that is a priority for both teams, obviously. And then second was ability to really like, yeah, the clash was really important to me because if the teams are not clashing well, and the arguments are not like weighed well. Like if you don't give me a comparative analysis as to why one team, like for example, if I'm AF, if I'm you, and I hear that Neg is saying X, Y, and Z, like if I don't have a proper rebuttal for that and not able to like challenge those ideas directly, that doesn't give the judge a lot of space to be like, oh, okay, like I see the clash. I see that these two speakers are presenting very opposing points, and they are persuading me to decide based on those points, right? So like obviously persuasion, topicality, and then a little bit was delivery, but honestly, I think everyone's at different like stages in their speech like experience. I noticed that some speakers seem really advanced, and some speakers seem like moderately new to it, or even just like could develop those skills further. So that I didn't really factor in that much. I just really focused on the topicality and approach to like clashing the points, I guess. So hopefully that answers your question. But again, like I would also suggest, I would also suggest like that you take my advice as a grain of salt, because other judges might say something different and their advice might be different. So that's my takeaway, and hopefully the comments were helpful so you can take that advice in next rounds. But again, take it with a grain of salt.
Thank you so much, Judge Ria. Your feedback was really on point. And please remain on Zoom after the debaters. The final virtual debate of the spUN tournament is scheduled to be streamed into the NSS International Space Development Conference, the ISDC, in Orlando, Florida, on Saturday, June 21 at 8:30 Pacific Daylight Time. This debate will be streamed out on NSS YouTube and NSS Facebook. We hope you will be joining us there, and you will see an announcement of the ISDC competing soon after the last debate round on Sunday, June 8th. Also, please mark your calendars for Saturday, July 12th, 2025, 8 a.m. CT for the spUN Program Awards event. We will be using the same Zoom link as today. Let me put that in the chat. And all I have to say to you is that you did a very excellent job. And thank you for participating in the 2025 spUN Debate Tournament. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, Judge.